In 2025, after more than 60 years, the United States government released thousands of documents connected to the assassination of JFK.
And honestly, the fact that some of these records stayed hidden for that long already raises one very uncomfortable question. If the official story was always so clear, why did it take more than 6 decades for the public to see these files? Because this is not just a story about a president being shot in Dallas. This is one of the biggest mysteries in modern history. We are talking about the CIA, the FBI, secret archives, witnesses, documents kept away from the public eye, and a case that still does not feel completely closed. So now, let me show you the images, the files, and tell you what I honestly think about all of this.
On November 22, 1963, John F. Kennedy was shot while riding through Dallas, Texas. The official version says that Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone. But Oswald never got the chance to tell his full story in a courtroom, because he was killed just 2 days after his arrest. And this is where the problem begins. For some people, the case ended right there. But for millions of people around the world, that was the exact moment when the real mystery began. Because when the man accused of killing the president is killed before he can speak, when intelligence agencies keep documents hidden for decades, and when new files appear again in 2025, files that should have been seen a long time ago, the question is no longer just who pulled the trigger. The question becomes, what did they know and why didn't they want us to know? The new documents did not arrive as one simple answer. They did not come as a clear confession. They did not come with one sentence saying, yes, everything was a conspiracy. But sometimes, the most important secrets are not hidden because they prove everything. They are hidden because they raise questions the system does not want to hear. And maybe that is exactly what makes the 2025 JFK files so interesting. Not because they close the case, but because they force us to look again at a story we were told to accept a long time ago. To understand why these documents still create so much unease, we have to go back for a few moments to the day everything changed. Dallas, November 22, 1963. A day that, at first, should have been completely normal. An official visit, people gathered along the streets, a president greeting the crowd, nothing that would suggest that in just a few seconds everything was about to change. And maybe that's exactly what makes this moment so powerful, because everything feels ordinary. Until suddenly it isn't. After that moment, everything moves incredibly fast. Lee Harvey Oswald is identified, he is arrested, and the story already begins to take shape in the public eye. One man, a lone attacker, a case that should be clear. But the more you look at it, the less simple it actually becomes. Because Oswald wasn't exactly a nobody. There are indications that he was being monitored, that he had been in sensitive locations, that he had contact with people already on the radar of intelligence agencies. And this is where a question starts to form, one that honestly doesn't sit right with me. If he was already on their radar, how was everything still able to happen exactly like this? Some say it was just a coincidence, others say it was a mistake, but explanations like that feel too simple for something this big. And then comes the moment that changes everything, because Oswald is killed just 2 days after his arrest. No trial, no full explanation, no chance to answer the questions that were just beginning to surface. From that point on, the possibility of a clear answer starts to fall apart. Because when the central figure disappears that quickly, what's left behind isn't clarity, it's gaps. And over time, those gaps are exactly where suspicion, theories, and doubt begin to grow. Years passed, investigations continued, official commissions tried to close the case. But every time it seemed like things were becoming clearer, something else appeared that didn't fully add up. And maybe that's why this case never really disappeared, because it was never truly finished. And now, after more than 60 years, new documents appear again. Documents that don't completely rewrite the story but don't fully confirm it either. And this is where it becomes truly interesting for me, because it's no longer just about the past. It's about what was known back then, what wasn't said, and why certain things stayed hidden for so long.
November 22nd, 1963. A day that changed America forever.
And this is where we get to the part that made me look at the 2025 files differently. Because when you hear that new JFK documents were released, your first instinct is probably to ask, did they finally find the smoking gun? Did they find the name of the person who planned everything? Did they find the one document that changes history? But the reality is more complicated than that. The 2025 documents did not arrive with one single page saying, yes, this was all a conspiracy. They did not come with a simple answer like, this is the truth and now the story is over. And honestly, maybe that is exactly what makes them more interesting. Because what was found is not necessarily a confession. What was found is context. A lot of context. And in a case like this, context can be just as important as direct proof. In March 2025, the National Archives released a new batch of records connected to the assassination of John F. Kennedy. And the full JFK collection contains more than 6 million pages of documents, photographs, films, audio recordings, and other materials. So we are not talking about a few forgotten papers in a drawer. We are talking about a massive archive built around one of the most sensitive moments in American history. And the part that feels strange to me is that before this release, the FBI reportedly discovered around 2,400 new records related to the Kennedy assassination. That's where I had to stop for a second, because this is a case that has been investigated for decades. It has been studied by historians, journalists, official commissions, independent researchers, and people all over the world. And still, in 2025, thousands of records appear that the public had not seen before. For me, the question is not only what is written in those documents. The question is, how is it possible that records like this are still being found after more than 60 years? Where were they? Why were they not properly gathered earlier? And if they do not change the official story, why did it take so long for people to be allowed to see them? From what was reported after the release, these files did not bring clear proof that someone else pulled the trigger, or that there was a hidden confession waiting inside the archives. But they did bring more details about CIA operations during the Cold War period, especially around Cuba and Mexico City. And for me, this is where everything becomes more interesting. Because Oswald does not appear in an empty space. His story is surrounded by embassies, contacts, surveillance, political tension, and intelligence agencies. And I am not saying this automatically proves that the CIA did something. That would be too simple and honestly too careless without direct proof. But what I am saying is this. When the man officially accused of the assassination moves through such a sensitive world, when intelligence agencies had records connected to him, and when some of those records stayed hidden for decades, of course people are not going to accept the simplest explanation without asking questions. Another important thing is that the media reported pretty clearly that these documents did not directly confirm the biggest conspiracy theories. And I think that needs to be said because otherwise the story would sound fake. But at the same time, the fact that they do not prove everything does not mean they raise no questions. Sometimes, a document does not need to tell you who did it in order to matter. Sometimes, it is enough for a document to show how much certain agencies knew, how much they were watching, and how complicated the world around Oswald really was. And maybe this is the key. Maybe the 2025 files do not change the main question, but they change the way we look at it. Because if we were told for decades that everything was clear, that the story was simple, and that there was nothing more to see, then why does every new release seem to reveal another layer? For me, this does not close the case. Makes it feel even stranger. Not because there is now one single piece of evidence that overturns everything, but because we can see how much was kept behind closed doors. And when a case needs more than 60 years before the public can see almost everything, trust does not grow. Trust breaks. And maybe the most unsettling part is this. Maybe the real secret was not necessarily the identity of a second shooter. Maybe the real secret was what the agencies knew before it happened, what they failed to stop, what they hid afterward, and what they never wanted to admit publicly. Because sometimes the system does not only hide crimes. Sometimes it hides mistakes. It hides embarrassment. It hides negligence. It hides uncomfortable connections. And sometimes, those things alone can be big enough to protect for generations. So when someone says, the 2025 documents didn't prove anything, I understand what they mean. But for me, the question is different. If there was nothing important there, why did it take this long for us to see it? And this is where, for me, the story becomes even more interesting. Because when we talk about the JFK files, people always expect one thing. One final document. One hidden sentence. One name. One piece of proof that clearly tells us who was behind it. But maybe the truth does not work like that. Maybe in cases like this, the truth does not appear on one single page. Maybe it appears in small pieces, in details that seem separate at first, but when you put them together they begin to show a much more uncomfortable picture. Because if you look at the JFK case only as a crime, then everything comes down to the classic question. Who pulled the trigger? But if you look at it as a political moment, as a moment when America was caught between the Cold War, Cuba, the CIA, internal tensions, and the constant fear of communism, then the story becomes much bigger than one man with a weapon. And this is the part one think many people ignore. JFK did not die in a quiet period. We are not talking about a normal, stable, transparent world. We are talking about the 1960s, a time when intelligence agencies had secret operations, hidden plans, political games, and methods the public did not fully understand. It was a world where governments did not say everything, and sometimes they did not even believe the public had the right to know everything. That is why, when documents mention the CIA, Cuba, Mexico City, or people being watched by intelligence services, I do not see them as just a small footnote. For me, they show the atmosphere surrounding the case. They show that Oswald's story was not isolated in some small corner of history. He appears inside a much wider network, in a period full of tension, in a space where information was controlled, watched, and sometimes hidden. And I am not saying this automatically proves that Oswald was used or that someone controlled him. But I am saying that the simple version where everything happened in a perfectly straight line, with no mistakes, no uncomfortable connections, and nothing hidden, is hard for me to accept. Because too many details around him seem to point toward a more complicated story. One thing that really makes me think is how quickly the official explanation formed. Almost immediately, the public was given the image of one guilty man. One lonely man. One unstable man. One man who acted without help. And maybe that is true. But the problem is that when authorities rush to give the public a complete story before all the questions are fully answered, people start to feel like something is being pushed in front of them too quickly. And then, when that exact man is killed before a trial, everything becomes even harder to accept. Because a trial would not have been only about punishment. A trial would have been about questions. About testimonies. About who knew him, where he had been, who he had spoken to, what the agencies knew about him, and what was not said in time. But that moment never came. And maybe that is why the JFK case never died. Because people never received that feeling of finality. They did not see a story carried all the way to the end. They saw a dead president, a dead suspect, hidden documents, and institutions that continued to say, "Trust us." But trust does not work like that. Trust is not demanded. Trust is built. And when, for decades, people keep learning that there are still hidden pages, redacted names, unpublished reports, or documents discovered too late, trust begins to break piece by piece. For me, the 2025 files are not important only because of what they say. They are important because of what they represent. They show that the official story needed protection, time, control, and delay. And even if that does not prove a total conspiracy, it proves something very important. The public did not receive the full picture when it needed it most. And this brings up another question that, to me, feels very serious. If the complete truth about an American president killed in public can be delayed for more than 60 years, then what other important stories are still being kept in archives? What other cases were closed too quickly? What other answers were hidden not because they would have destroyed the world but because they would have destroyed trust in institutions? That is the part that unsettles me the most. Maybe some documents were not hidden because they revealed a perfectly organized plan. Maybe they were hidden because they revealed chaos, mistakes, incompetence, surveillance, embarrassing connections. operations that were never meant to be seen. And sometimes for a system, admitting that it failed can be almost as dangerous as admitting that it lied. Because when the public sees that authorities knew more than they said, the next question appears immediately. What else do they know? And if they hid this back then, why should we believe things are different today? And I am not saying this to turn every document into a conspiracy. Actually, I think we have to be careful. We have to separate what is proven from what is only possible. But at the same time, we cannot ignore the fact that secrecy creates conspiracy theories. When institutions hide information for too long, they do not kill the theories. They feed them. So for me, the JFK files from 2025 are not the end of the story. They are just another open door in a very long corridor. Maybe we do not find the absolute answer there. But we find something almost as important. The reason why people never stopped asking questions. And maybe that is the real message of the JFK case. Not that every theory is true. Not that every rumor should be believed. But that when a system asks for trust while offering only fragments, silence, and documents released after entire generations, people will inevitably start searching for themselves for what they were never given. And when we reach 2025 and we are still discussing the same questions, it means the problem was never fully solved. It was only pushed forward. From one generation to another. From one file to another. From one archive to another. And honestly, maybe that is exactly what makes the JFK case so powerful even today. Not only the death of a president, but the feeling that somewhere behind the documents, the stamps, the redacted names, and the incomplete answers, there is still something we were never fully told.
Tell me in the comments what you think. Were the 2025 files just old documents with nothing important inside, or were they another sign that the official story was
Never truly complete? And if you like stories like this, where official history leaves too many shadows behind, subscribe to The Hidden Order. The next case might be even stranger.